For your attendance. I'm just going to begin with a karakia. Tuia Karonga, Tuia Karoro, Tuia Kawaho, Tuia Kiroto, Tuia Hi Tangata, Karonga Te Po, Karonga Te Ao, Humie Huie, Taikie. Thank you all. We have apologies from Mayor Tim King, from Councillor Walker, Councillor Dowler and Councillor Butler from the TDC. Are there any other apologies? Just going to no change in the order of business. My ambition is to try and keep this reasonably tight. There is no public forum. The one item we have on the agenda is the recommendation from the Saxton Field Hearings Panel. My plan is to allow elected representatives to raise any questions from our officers after they've been able to give a report from the Saxton Field Committee. It's then my intention to, after those questions of officers are over, to simply then take a mover and a seconder for the resolution before us and allow us to debate it. The issue has been through quite a long process, and it is my intention to try and keep the morning relatively concise. So can I welcome Andrew from our offices
just to give a technical vote for the apologies.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I have a Stuart? My chief executive's having to keep early in the morning for me. Brain's not functioning properly. I've got a mover from Councillor Bryant and Deputy Mayor Bryant, seconded by Councillor Courtney, to accept the apologies. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no, that is carried. Thanks, Nigel. Over to Andrew to introduce the report that we have on the Saxton Field policy change.
Morena Tato. Thanks, Mayor Nick. I've got Grant Reburn from Tasman District Council sitting beside me as well. And I would say the chair of the Saxton Hearings Panel, Mr. Derek Shaw, would like to have been here, but he's on leave, unavoidable leave at the moment, so he can't be here. And also the report author, Mr. Paul Harrington, is not able to be here because he is also on leave. I think it's something about school holidays. But they are quite happy for the members of the hearing panel, of which there are 3 here in the room today, and staff to present this report and take any questions if there are any questions. As you said, Mayor Nick, this has been subject to quite a lot of conversation since around 2020, actually, through the Saxton Committee and the councils, and more recently around this particular issue in detail of alcohol advertising at Saxton Field. You'll recall that last year there was an exemption made by the councils to allow international cricket to occur at Saxton Field. The reasoning for this process that we're going through now is that another exemption was not seen to be the best way to deal with that question a second time round. So I think you've probably all put your minds to this quite significantly over the last couple of years. I don't propose to say anything more about this report. This is effectively a recommendation from the hearings panel. If you have any questions, either members of the hearing panel or staff can take those questions and respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Is there any update that the Chief Executive or others can provide on the level of interest from either Central Districts cricket or New Zealand cricket in the prospects of games for the summer season of 24-25?
I'll start, and Andrew, you might want to. I know you've had some detailed conversations, but I can say there's extreme interest from New Zealand cricket. They love the ground. They like playing, and they'd like to have a long-term deal with the 2 councils around having cricket here, international cricket. So both from the Central League and from New Zealand cricket, I've had conversations, and there's movements afoot to have some cricket in the new year, hopefully. And but more than that, for the long term, So yeah, Andrew, anything else that you'd like to add?
Thanks, Nigel. So just to support that, I think Nelson Tasman have invested heavily in Saxton over the years. It's seen as a premier cricket venue internationally. Is really, really significant in the international and domestic cricket calendar. The chief executive is quite right. We stand a very good chance of getting a really good summer of cricket ahead of us this coming summer and also into the future as well. He's correct that New Zealand cricket, Central Districts cricket, see this as a really good venue. He's also correct that they also find us a very welcoming region to bring cricket to as well. So we've got a lot of ducks lined up in terms of being able to attract international cricket here. And they're also really pleased that we're paying so much attention to this particular issue as well, whatever the outcome.
Just a quick further question. The change in the Saxton Field Reserve Management Plan that we are considering today says that this will be reconsidered at the next review of the Saxton Field Management Plan. When is that next review of the management plan due? Is an officer able to clarify that, please?
Thanks, Mayor Nick. So normally Reserves Act management plan reviews occur every 10 years. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer than that. We did this one in 2021. If we stick to that timeline, as I think we ideally should, we'd be looking at a review in 2031.
2031. Thank you. Other questions from colleagues? Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, through the chair. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, about 4. A note on the recommendation at point 2, it notes the plan to update the request, I guess, from to update Nelson Tasman Regional Alcohol Strategy 2006, and it's obviously almost 20 years out of date. Are there any plans to undertake that review? Have there been any discussions at a organisational level?
Thanks, through you, Mayor Nick. The answer is no. You'll see it's just a note. That doesn't mean that those conversations wouldn't happen. Actually, they should happen, and it would need to be considered in the 2 councils' strategy team prioritisation work. If the councils felt that this was a high priority to undertake, they may consider that it should be done sooner than later.
Okay, would it be possible, just as a and maybe an action after the meeting, just to circulate? I'd like to know why what the key reasons are that they'd like to see it updated. And then I did wonder whether local beverages are for sale at Saxton during these games. So I'm thinking things like, Chia Sisters, Tohu wine, Tohu wines, Siegfried wines, any of the local beers. Are there local beverages for sale, or are there kind of, I guess, contracts in place that preclude local suppliers? So it's only, sponsored drinks such as Asahi?
Sorry, through you, Mayor Nick. I actually don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, is it possible to just follow up on that as well and just circulate that to me or elected members? Thanks. In the document, the amendments, there are amendments in red and blue. I just wasn't clear from the way it was worded. Are the red ones being included and the blue? Or
I can clarify that from the chair.
I know. Is it possible just to have the staff respond, please?
Well, yes, it is, but I am chairing the meeting, and as long as the response is accurate, I am chairing the meeting, and so the resolution that the council combined is considering are all the amendments. The difference between the red and the blue ones is the reds are those that were in the original consultation document. The blue is what was added after the hearings panel. Yep, the reason it's proper for me to clarify is that the combined councils is considering all of the amendments as back from the hearings panel, both those that were consulted on and the blue that was added by the hearings panel.
So the intention is that all of the red and the blue text is included in the.
That is the resolution that
Yeah.
the combined councils will consider today, Councillor Sanson.
And then just to clarify, under 4.8.1, it talks about the next review of the reserve management plan. Did I hear you respond to me, Nick, to say that the year for that is anticipated to be 2031?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I thought that when there'd been discussions around this previously, around this council table, this it was only going to be a couple of years, like 2 or 3 years before that, that what we were considering in terms of this change was only going to be for a few years. Has that changed? Has the year changed or the intention changed?
Thanks for the question. I actually can't recall any discussions where we've talked about having a different timeline for a review of the management plan compared to what the Reserves Act requires. So, yeah, I just cannot recall those discussions. We would normally work to the 10-year timeline, but quite often, as I said before, we go well beyond that just because of the various the strategy and policy pressures on the council staff.
So if it's reviewed in 2031, by the time it's kind of reviewed and consulted on and potentially adopted, it could be 2032. So maybe 8 more years. Yeah, 8 more years of kind of allowing alcohol advertising for games, I guess, is what we're considering today.
Albeit the elected councils combined have the option at any time to trigger a review at an earlier time if they wish. That will ultimately be a matter for councils over the period between now and 31. Could I just ask a quick supplementary on Councillor Sanson's question about the alcohol policy? Am I correct that the alcohol policies for Nelson and Tasman councils are separate, or is it joint?
Thanks. Good question, me and Nick. I'm not an expert in the alcohol policy, but I did have a look at that several days ago, and I believe it is a joint regional alcohol policy between the two councils.
Thank you. I'm going to take Councillor Greening online, and then I'm going to have Councillor Rainey, then Councillor Stella, and then Councillor Anderson. So, Councillor Greening, are you able to hear me okay?
I can. Thank you very much.
The floor is yours for questions.
I did have a preliminary question, which was how do I ask questions, but I think I've resolved that now. I just put my hand up on the online thing, so thank you very much for responding to that. My question really relates to some of the mechanisms within the motion that is being proposed, and that's it contemplates the CEO negotiating an outcome, and I'm just wondering whether staff have considered contemplating guidance on those negotiations, and whether that guidance will specify what can and can't be conceded in those negotiations. And if there is guidance being contemplated, when will that guidance be brought back to this council, this joint council, for approval?
My reading of it, Councillor Greening, in item 4.8.2.4 is simply that the chief executive of the two councils and the chair of the Saxton Field Committee would be able to permit, it doesn't, with the approval.
Yeah, that's the essence of my question, which is there seems to be a lack of any indication of guidance.
Yeah, I just wanted, I think it's ultimately a question for Andrew and the chief executive. But as I read the actual wording of the amended reserve management plan, it would be simply a matter of the chief executive giving permission, i.e. permitting, an activity rather than negotiation, providing it met the amended policy that we're adopting. But I'd be happy to take both Andrew and the chief executive on that for you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks, Drew. Yeah, me and Nick. Good question, Councillor Greening. So the specific question was around would the chief executives take guidance? I think the approach that's taken in the proposed change to the management plan is that the discretion would be with the chief executives and the chair of the Saxton committee. So it'd be effectively a delegation through the policy of the management plan to those three people to make the decision.
Without any guidance as to how they should negotiate.
Guidance in terms of what is written in the proposed policy and the management plan, and that's what it's limited to.
Yeah. So this is my concern. So I suppose I'm going to invite staff to maybe consider some guidance for negotiations, because we should have some bottom lines. We shouldn't just be going into a negotiation where the other party says, look, the event won't happen unless I get everything here. And I think there are concerns about the type of hoardings that might be put up, the volume. I appreciate that under the existing approach that we've had, because there's been a presumption of no, the parties have been much more willing to make concessions. Clearly, if you're going to move to a presumption of yes, you're going to have probably the other parties making less concessions, being more demanding. And I just want to know exactly what the bottom lines are for the councils when they do negotiate. Will it just be a rollover because they have no choice, because the policy is indicating we want them in events at all costs, or is there a bottom line? I think it's very important that in these types of negotiations, there is guidance for those who are negotiating. Otherwise, there is no guidance and everything is effectively conceded.
I have a little bit of the opposite perspective, that we're being very, very prescriptive here, and it's a question of just how level of detail we go. But that will be an issue that we handle during the debate. Further questions? Next is Councillor Rainey.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. Under 4.8.2.4, the recommendation, and Andrew, you just outlined that arrangements will be at the discretion of the two CEs and the chair of the Saxton Field Committee. So, given the commentary that the plan stays in place till 31, that means that discretionary power stays until 2031. Is that correct?
Yes, through you, Mayor Nick, that's precisely correct. Yes.
Okay, so if, through you again, Mayor Nick, if councils were of a mind to change that position, what mechanism would they have to do that? Would they have to wait until a review of the...
No, councils can change any policy or any plan by giving a directive, as we do at the beginning of each year, and say, hey, look, these are the policies that we're thinking strange, and exactly the same way. I understand that, Mayor.
I understand that. What would be the mechanism? Would it have to be a notice of motion? If there was no general appetite to bring this to the table, what would be the mechanism by which councils would be able to consider that?
It could come, as I would understand, through the Saxton Field Committee. It could come from either of the constituent councils saying that they wished a review of the reserve management plan to occur, as for any of our reserve management plans.
One of my concerns is that there's a lack of elected member oversight in this 8-year period till 2031 or beyond, depending on how long it takes to put in place. And if you go to 4.8.1.2, it states quite clearly that collaborative work will be undertaken with stakeholders around developing new policy for inclusion in the next review of the plan. So there's some kind of time frame indicated here where there's going to be work on phasing out. What is that time frame? Is it the last possible moment before the plan changes, and who will undertake that work? Staff, elected members, or who?
Through you, Mayor Nick. Deep in thought.
Sorry, floor's yours.
Through you, Mayor Nick. Look, my interpretation of that in this proposed policy change is that we would be working right from this point in terms of working with our partners and stakeholders on this around this particular issue. It's an important issue that we have seen through the last couple of years. When we're talking about stakeholders, we're talking about potentially a number of the submitters. We're talking about the cricket agencies that we work with. So I think the approach that I would see being taken with this is that we have a live process of engagement. We have an interest in what's happening nationally around alcohol advertising. And I think that's going to be an ongoing conversation as well. So I think rather than giving you a specific timeline of what would happen when and by who, which I can't do, I would say that actually we would see this as a live issue that we would be working on from day one.
Subsequent question then. So the resolution doesn't give me any personal comfort, with all due respect, that there's any indication that that's going to happen. It just says collaborative work will be undertaken. Do you think that the resolution lacks specificity on this issue? Because I'm concerned that this could actually just drift out until 2030, whenever.
Look, Andrew, you can get into more detail, but my conversations with New Zealand Cricket and Central Districts Cricket is that there is a real appetite to address this and nationally, and that they don't want this to become an issue for cricket. But it's something that's got to be worked on. So that for the last international cricket match we had, all we saw on the boundary was BRB. There was it was a great family day out. There is no desire from from New Zealand cricket to push alcohol. I think they've got some current arrangements, and they'll be working to think about this. But
Thank you.
Councillor Stallard, questions?
Thanks, Mendick. The Saxon Field Reserve Management Plan states that the two councils approve separately recommendations by the Joint Committee, and that minor amendments to the plan be made by councils via the committee in consultation with affected parties and so on and so on. So the process by which we change from the two councils considering the recommendations separately to together today in the Joint Council, have we followed the right process in that it was a resolution of council rather than amending the plan? Are we currently acting in a way that contradicts the plan, and does it matter?
Through you, Nick, I don't feel well prepared to respond to that question on the fly. I feel pretty comfortable that we've run a really thorough process here throughout the process by coming to the councils, getting decisions made on the process that we should be following. But if I was to being asked to do a full review on that, I certainly couldn't give you the response to that now.
To some degree, the question's a governance question for me. And that was cricket wrote to me and set out the timetable for the process that would be necessary for our region to have any chance of being able to host cricket. As a consequence, and a discussion with Mayor Tim King said that actually it's a very thorough process when you have a very specific proposed amendment to the management plan, that would be publicly advertised, that there would be the opportunity for everybody to have a say. Alcohol Watch got the opportunity to have a say when the amendment was proposed and when it was put out for submission. And then both councils debated and passed a resolution to delegate to this joint committee the final decision. Ultimately, myself and Mayor King are responsible for the governance arrangements for our two councils. We're very satisfied that it is a very robust, actually quite drawn out process for what is a quite minor amendment.
So if I could just clarify, but we are acting inconsistently with the plan, and that is the idea that will continue, that recommendations will continue to come to the joint council, rather than councils separately until 2031.
Well, ultimately, at each general election, councils will make their decisions about what joint committees and what delegated powers there will be. So it is incorrect to say that, well, we're locked in till 2031. We have made a decision that does commit the council for the arrangements for Saxton Field for this term of council. But ultimately, after the local body elections, the two councils will sit down. I'm hoping they will continue to run Saxton as a joint committee. I think it's a really good relationship between Nelson and Tasman, but ultimately that will be a decision for the elected councils after the next local election. Councillor Mailing, sorry, I'll take Councillor Skinner then Mailing. We're in the mode of questions. Look, I will ensure that there is, sorry, I'll go Councillor Skinner, then Anderson. This is Mackenzie. A time for questions. I will ensure that in the debating stage, every councillor that wishes to be able to express a view is able to do so. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you. Are there a number of other regions, cities who are and would be bidding for international games over top of us?
Through you, Mayor, yes.
And do any of those other regions have a similar policy where they, or looking at a similar policy to remove alcohol advertising completely?
No, we haven't found any other regions that have a similar policy.
And have any other regions indicated they might consider sometime in the near future of phasing it out?
Not that I'm aware of.
Then I'd ask why we've got in blue and in red at 4.8.2.5, we are looking at phasing it out in the next review, or assuming it will be phased out. As an assumption here, it will be phased out.
Through you, Mayor Nick. It's a really good question. As you are all aware, there are some very strong views in our community. We say in the report that we have a fairly polarised community on this matter. We have tried through this amendment to find a balanced approach so that we can give due attention to the various concerns in the community and the very various benefits or benefits associated with international cricket here in Nelson, Nelson and Tasman. So that's the reason why that's in there. It's part of that package of giving due attention to the various positions and views that we have in our community.
And last question, if we were to alter it in such a way as to say that we're going to remove alcohol advertising completely, or potentially the potential we'd phase it out in the near future, would we likely miss out on international cricket games in the next year or two, and or international cricket games when New Zealand hosts the World Cup in 2028? Would we miss out on games to Nelson and they would go elsewhere if we were of the plan to be an outlier in that bidding?
Well, it's a pretty competitive business, international cricket. There are a lot of venues around the country, a lot more than there used to be. Our Saxon Oval is actually a relatively recent venue to come into the play. It's increased the competition around the country for international cricket. It's a very good venue and it's a very attractive venue. The question is probably as much for New Zealand, or probably more for New Zealand cricket than it is for Nelson and Tasman councils. But you know, being in a competitive space, they weigh up the different costs and benefits of the different venues to decide which they prefer, because they have existing contracts with suppliers. One of those suppliers is a liquor brand. They also have obligations to their stakeholders the same way that we do. So I think if the councils were to decide no, they didn't want to allow alcohol advertising as the current policy is, I think you would lose matches to the other venues around the country. Cricket World Cup, I think you would consider that in a different way, because that's an event that would be managed under the Major Events Management Act, and that if you're going to be hosting events under the Major Events Management Act, you're effectively handing over full control of your venue to the hiring organisation. So it's treated differently to, say, an international cricket match in the normal calendar.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm going to have Councillor Anderson and then Mackenzie. Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you, through me, Nick. Just a question about the hearing panel. Were there any councillors on the hearing panel that decided against making the exemption to the Saxton Field Management Plan in October last year?
The members of the Saxton Field Committee, I understand, was Councillor Rollo, Councillor Skinner. Who are the other members of the panel? I'm sorry, Councillor Daiki
And Councillor Dowler.
and Councillor Dowler. Would any of them like to respond to the question from Councillor Anderson? Was it a unanimous decision to recommend the change in the management plan?
So the question, did any of those councillors vote against making the exemption to the Saxton Field Management Plan in October of last year?
I think it'll be a matter of
question. I'm not sure the question there. Sorry,
it'll be a matter of voting record, but I don't want to be disingenuous. There are.
I'll withdraw that. The other question, just along Councillor Greening's lines. So I'm wondering about negotiation, and I do trust the CEO and I believe the quality of relationships are very, very important. I don't understand what, so I imagine negotiation is about give and take. Are we just asking nicely, or are we actually going in with any power at all?
I would just bring to the councillors' attention the language is that the chief executive and the two chief executives and the chair make a decision as to whether permit. It's not really a negotiation, but I'm very happy for the chief executive. He needs to make a decision as to whether he would permit, under the conditions of the management plan, the exemption.
And that's what the mayor said, but I have no reason to fear those discussions. We've got a really strong relationship with New Zealand cricket and only an intention to enjoy cricket.
Any further questions, Councillor Anderson? Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Nick. Do we have any visibility of the contract expiry dates between New Zealand Cricket or Central Districts Cricket with their alcohol companies? And I have a supplementary question after that.
Yeah, sure. I understood it was 5 years, but I'm happy to take guidance from Andrew or any other staff member that's got information on the contract between New Zealand Cricket and Asahi.
Through you, Mayor Nick, no, I don't know what the term of that contract is. If it's 5 years, I actually don't know. We don't have a direct relationship with New Zealand Cricket around contracting of our venue. New Zealand Cricket works with its provincial union, Central Districts Cricket, and we contract with Central Districts Cricket. So it's a bit of an indirect relationship, but you know, it'd be fair to say that there has certainly been, through Central Districts Cricket, a lot of pressure put on New Zealand Cricket from our end around managing this particular issue. So they're not blind to the challenges that we are trying to work through here.
Councillor Mackenzie. All right. If there are no further questions, I'm sorry, Councillor Mailing.
If there's no further, I'm happy to move the motion, but the only question I would have was the economic benefit of these games to our region. I can remember games where there was 6,000, and I think last time it was earlier in the season and it was about 4,400. So do you have an idea of the economic benefit?
Thanks, through you, Mayor Nick. Thanks, Councillor Mailing. That's a good question. I can come back with that information if you like. NRDA does do pretty extensive economic analysis around these international events. So if you would like, I can come back with that information to elected members.
I understand the signal I'm getting from Councillor Skinner is that you had a further question?
Yeah, just a quick question. Have we, in the history of any international cricket games or any cricket games, ever had any poor behaviour relating to alcohol?
Any information on that, Andrew?
Through you, Mayor Nick, in my time here, which is this time round just over 3 years, I'm not aware of any incidents of poor behaviour that have been escalated to being, to being significant enough for
bad behaviour.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
I'm about to move and second the motions unless there's any last questions. Councillor Brand?
Thanks, through the Mayor. With the, it sort of ties into Councillor Mackenzie's question about the sponsorship. So with this coming up and sort of tying into the question that Councillor Skinner put forward about other councils or other regions having this type of policy or anything like that, because of the pushback that happened during the time, has the international cricket or New Zealand cricket or other sports at a national or international level talked about or feedback that they would be looking at the alcohol advertising or the sponsorship that they get to deter the alcohol advertising, just as happened previously many decades ago about the smoke-free with tennis and removing Benson and Hedges and all of that from international sports. Has that conversation actually started? Because just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean we don't have to go down a path of has it?
Thanks for you, Nick. And thanks for the question, Councillor Brand. So I think we have talked about it previously. One of our big challenges we have with this situation is that competition challenge between different cities and venues around the country that we've talked about already. You'll be aware that a couple of years ago there was a proposal, a bill put forward by the Green Party, I think it was, for a national approach to alcohol advertising at sports events, and that was voted down by both of the major parties in government, as I understand it. We do think that if there is to be a change to alcohol advertising at sport events as a policy, it needs to be dealt with at a central level, so it creates a level playing field across the country. And if we were to be part of a recommendation to government to do that, it would probably be through Local Government New Zealand rather than directly from this council.
Thank you. Councillor Brand?
I was just along the thoughts, because of the district licensing committees and the structure and the legislation that has been coming through about the harm that alcohol has and the deterrent that has been placed onto those committees to approve or the renewals or discontinuation or approve alcohol licenses. A venue or reserve, because we have other reserves and other events happen at those reserves, and there's a discretion about whether the event can have an alcohol license to continue, would this decision have an impact on whether or not Saxton facilities would be able to renew an operating license of alcohol?
Another good question, Councillor Brand. So there are different processes. So one's a regulatory process, one is a land management policy process under the Reserves Act. So I don't think they may speak to each other quite indirectly, but the regulatory process will be based on the case that's put forward from a regulatory perspective.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap up the questions there. Thank our officers for their work on it. I'm going to move resolutions 1 to 4 in my name. My understanding is that Deputy Mayor Bryant is happy to second the resolution. In speaking to the move-in of this resolution, my view is actually this is about a trade-off between the opportunity for our region to be able to host first-class cricket at the magnificent facility of which both councils should take huge pride in at Saxton Field, relative to those that have a view that any form of alcohol advertising or sponsorship causes harm. My view is the benefit is great. that we are in very difficult economic times, and our two councils have got a duty to do as much as we can to attract events to our region and the benefits that flow through to them, relative to my view that the level of harm from sponsorship of alcohol at those events is minimal, is being blown out of all proportion, and makes this a very straightforward decision. I attended the games last summer, was hugely proud both of the broadcast and the events. And if I had asked 10 children or any others, they wouldn't even known that there was some advertising for the Boundary Road brewery at those. The second point I want to know is about the history, because some people have questioned the process. Let me be really clear about what occurred. It was never proposed in the Saxonfield Management Plan in 2021 to ban alcohol sponsorship. That wasn't there. There was one submission from the then of the DHB, and the Saxonfield, without any community consultation at all, just on the basis of that one submission, put the rule that has got us in trouble into the Saxonfield Committee. And so when I hear councillors saying, oh, there's been a lack of consultation and process, actually, there's been far more consultation about the amendment to the Saxonfield Management Plan as a consequence of the controversy over the cricket games last summer than what there ever was back in 2021. And let's look at what occurred in that submission process. There was 150 submissions, 122 submissions favoured the change that is in the rule, and 27 against. Having gone through those public submissions, are there really councillors that say, well, we should ignore those? We've got the wisdom and the justice, and we're simply going to override those. We have, amongst our two councils, delegated to the role of managing Saxonfield to our competent colleagues. And I think they do a damn good job. I think both councils should be tremendously proud of that Saxonfield Committee and that all that has been achieved over the last 30 years. And to make a decision, a negative decision today, would be to effectively vote no confidence in those colleagues that we put on the Saxonfield Committee to do a good job, of which I have great confidence in and are hugely excited about the work that they do. The further point then for those that are opposed to this resolution that I struggle with is that ratepayers have put millions and millions of dollars into that oval facility. Why would we do so then not to use it? I think it is a crying shame that for 5 years we had no Black Cat games. We sit here on the eve of an exciting opportunity to have the Black Caps back in Nelson, and I make no apologies at all for being a strong advocate for them being able to participate and to get those games later this year. Now, I acknowledge there's actually a highly politicised argument in Parliament that I've seen about the issue of alcohol sponsorship, just as there was for tobacco 20 years ago. Let Parliament have that debate. That is the right place for it. For us in the minutiae of the Saxonfield Committee to believe that we're going to change the world by the way in which we manage that Saxonfield facility is getting above our status. That is all we are here to do. That is to maximise the opportunities there are at that Saxonfield facility. And if Parliament does have a debate about banning sponsorship of alcohol, then it would be a national policy, because all that will happen if we ban sponsorship of alcohol at international cricket games at Saxonfield is the games will be in Hastings or Tauranga or Queenstown or Dunedin, and there will be zero gain in terms of the argument around harm from alcohol and its sponsorship, and just an own goal for this community. They are the reasons why I support this resolution, and I thank colleagues on the Saxonfield Committee and our staff that have enabled us to get to this quite sensible amendment to the Saxonfield Committee. I have to say, I don't agree with all of the provisions that are in the amendment. It is a compromise. It does plan for the phasing out in the longer term, and that's because I have a view around this council table respectful of those that have a strong view around alcohol, and in my view, the resolutions represent that sort of compromise position of wanting in the long term to phase it out, albeit in my view, the council in future would be unwise to phase it out unless it was part of a national picture for the very reasons that we've seen in the last 12 months in the debate that has occurred around international cricket and Saxon Field facility. They are the reasons for moving the motion. Would the seconder like to speak now or later in the debate?
Later in the day.
Open for debate.
Thank you, Ian. And I guess I'm one of the Saxon Field Committee members that abstained from this hearing. So can I just acknowledge Councillor Dakey and Councillor Dowler for taking my place? Because certainly in my other role as District Licensing Chair from Tasman District Council, alcohol does cause harm. And there's a mechanism for that. And the new community participation bill that is now there strengthens the community's ability to have their say about alcohol licensing in what I think is the right position. So I'll be supporting this motion in terms of I watched the video, nice hearing of the councillors in there, and read all the literature, and it was a hearing that was robust. It was a hearing that heard from a wide sector of our community, and I believe we've ended in the right place. So this doesn't actually guarantee liquor licensing at Saxon Field. There's still a regulatory process and an application for a special licence that has to go through a district licensing committee to get that. But what this does do is gives Nelson Tasman the opportunity to rehost international cricket games for the purpose that was set up originally. And I had the pleasure of working through the sports sector through the smoke-free bill. And oh my goodness, the support that was there when smoking companies could sponsor, and the alternative sponsorships from Smoke Free New Zealand was awesome until the legislation came through and everything was smoke-free. And then the funding just disappeared. So I feel for a sector in terms of sport that actually does deliver positive benefits to our community. And it is a shame the situation we have where we have alcohol that's one of those mechanisms to allow it. But again, this is about utilising an asset that was built specifically to host these events. And as Mayor Smith has said, is if this didn't happen, we wouldn't see cricket back here. And it wouldn't just be cricket. Then we'd be asking the question, is it okay to drink a beer at Suburbs Football Club after a football game, or at the hockey pavilion after the hockey game? So for me, this is about land use. This is about permitted activities. And then district licensing sits with your district licensing committee. And the community will have the ultimate say of where that ends up. So I'll be supporting the resolution.
Thank you for that contribution. Councillor Manning.
Well, I will also be supporting the motion. And I just look at what happens in our community in terms of alcohol harm, and I draw on my 25 years of policing experience where I saw a huge amount of alcohol harm, but I saw a lot of it in the home rather than at sporting events. When I was a teenager, I saw it at sporting events, and I was probably part of it, to be honest, but you don't see it today. And I look at the young people, and they get to view their heroes when there's an international match at our district. And it's just tremendous to watch. I coached junior cricket for a long, long time. And the kids really look forward to these games, and it's really important to them. I see the benefits there, and I also see the benefits in tourism, because our district is displayed on national and international TV. To see Mount Arthur and those other mountains on international TV, it's just exposure that you can't get elsewhere. So it's very important to have international cricket at Saxon. And I live within 200 yards of that venue, and I go to all the games, and I'm a supporter and a bit of a tragic, but I'm also a rugby tragic as well. So, and I see much poorer behaviour at rugby games than I ever see at cricket games. So to take this away and to give other opportunities to other venues, I just think is a retrograde step. And it's the hospitality industry in the city more than in Tasman that actually would suffer if we didn't do this, because that's where most of the hospitality industry is. So to me, it makes sense. I need to put my hand up and say I was on the Saxton committee for 9 years, and I'm probably part of this mistake that we made in 2001, and I'm sorry for that, but I know Councillor Skinner was with me, so you know, we
don't get me apologising, really.
No. Well, I will, because we did make a mistake when we did that, and it wasn't our intention, from my memory. So to me, it's a no-brainer to do this. I see cricket and the way international cricket behaves in a very good state today to what it was, say, 30 or 40 years ago when young people did go and drink too much at venues, but it wasn't the advertising, it was a day out and to get on the lounge. You don't see that today because you get kicked out. And I went and watched New Zealand at the Melbourne Cricket Ground the last time New Zealand played there, and you didn't misbehave because you were out. You were gone within minutes. So to me, that behaviour just doesn't happen. You don't see it. And that advertising, I didn't even know the name of the beer when I was there. You know, it doesn't interest me. I'll drink craft beer or a glass of wine. And I do know that there was some local wine there because I was in the VIP exposure and there was some local wine. So to me, it's a no-brainer. I support this. And it was an error by the committee in 2001, or 2021 to be exact.
I'd like to pass the floor over to Councillor Greening, who's on Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion before the council today supports a presumption of yes to alcohol advertising for international events. This is about alcohol promotion, not consumption, and I've heard some people go on about consumption issues. This is about promotion, not consumption. First, I'd like to make some observations from the hearing. Many submissions for the presumption of yes applied what I would call reductive logic. For example, events will go elsewhere. Yet we heard today's staff outline the fact that Saxon Field is highly desired by New Zealand cricket. It's a great venue. My response to the reductive logic is that without councils making a stand on this important issue, the sporting industry and marketing companies will not change their behaviour. The same reductive arguments have been made about changes to smoking laws or corporate tax rates. It's a lowest common denominator argument that has never been very compelling and shouldn't be. Our role as governance is to influence the best outcomes for our community, including for the least well off, not just for occasional sporting events. We already have many other national events coming to the region that will provide an economic boon for the region. So I don't put all my eggs into this one basket. Other than the many subjective submissions made, there was really only one expert submission from health, and they opposed the presumption of yes. And I would have thought, based solely on the evidence, the hearing committee would have had no choice but to maintain the status quo. So I suppose I'm of the view that there should not be a presumption of yes. And if there is, that it should not be left at the discretion of CE negotiations. And for that reason, I'm opposing today's motion, and I'm also going to propose an amendment within this motion to put some mitigation and control into it should it succeed. So why am I opposed to this change? Well, there's really two reasons. The first is the impact on youth. Look, Saxton Field was funded for the use of our community and youth, not for international events. It's the well-being of our community and those most vulnerable that should be at the front of our mind today. That's our role as governance. Also, this issue has already been considered by far greater experts than councillors sitting on the hearing committee when it comes to the impact on alcohol advertising on youth. The conclusion reached by those experts was that alcohol advertising is restricted to the evenings on television. Council's presumption of yes today undermines and is consistent with that national position. And contrary to Naismith, a no vote today does not prevent these events happening. The plan still provides for an exemption process that we have already used. And again, contrary to Mayor Smith, alcohol does harm. Secondly, bargaining position. The motion is vague, or the plan is vague in directions to the CEO as to what can be conceded, and in my opinion, weakens our negotiation position from the start. A presumption of no forces the applicant to put forward a greater level of concessions, and this should be our approach. This was our position last time, and an outcome was achieved. This approach also ensures councillors, not the CEO, is making the call on the concessions. That's our role as government. Clearly, this approach does not prevent sporting events from happening and preventing sporting events having preliminary discussions with staff to put their best case forward to councillors. The motion today will not achieve this. Instead, the CEO will be left to make concessions over the extent and style of the advertising. What happens if a sports events contract insists on a large number of hoardings, far larger than what was conceded last time, with imagery of young people drinking and with bylines like drinking is great as a young person? And if they do not get this event, then they will say, if they do not get all the concessions that they're asking for, the event won't happen. Is the CEO expected to just concede to everything that's demanded to get the event across the line? There's no control on the contractual clauses that could arise in these contracts. And I think some guidance is required at the very least. Otherwise, this will turn out to be hoardings everywhere, because otherwise we'll miss out on the event. So my preference is for a presumption of no, subject to the current exemption approach that requires a business case to be brought to council, an approach that is already available from the current policy without changing it. However, if clarity is required in the current policy, then it should add wording to the effect that a business case for restricted alcohol advertising at national events can be considered by the councils should it have merit. But I think what we've got now is perfectly adequate. If I'm not supported today, then I would strongly recommend that clear guidance on where the CEO cannot go is drafted for councillors to consider before any future advertising is approved, because the CEO must ensure there is low visibility, not massive hoardings everywhere, that there is no imagery of young people associated with the drinking, which could happen, given that should you go down the line of a presumption of yes, that there are no strap lines and there are no digital links in these posters that take young people to websites that try to close the deal. And hoardings should really only provide or present the product name and nothing else. That should be the type of guidance that we should be providing to those negotiations. But at the moment, there's none. And if the CEO is confronted with, if you don't give us the event we go, will probably collapse because the policy is saying it should be pro-event. So that's my concern about the lack of guidance. Now, if this guidance can be achieved, if the advertising, the promotion of alcohol can't achieve these very simple requests, then the event should be declined. And the event that's occurred previously had minimal advertising, but my fear is that once you go for a presumption of yes, the advertising is going to lift quite dramatically. So generally, I'm opposed to the motion. I would like to propose an amendment to the resolution, because I'm concerned that if it does pass, there is a lack of guidance to the CEO. And so I'd propose an amendment, and the amendment is that the guidance for delegated CEO negotiations be drafted and approved by Nelson and Tasman councils.
My great difficulty, Councillor Greening, with an amendment is that our standing orders require that an amendment be provided to the chair in advance. What's even worse in this situation is that the amendments have gone through a hearings panel. And so I don't think I'm going to be able to accept an amendment that's not been provided and circulated to councillors in advance. The floor is Councillor Mackenzie's.
Thank you very much, through you, Mayor Nick. Look, I want to acknowledge the members of the public who have submitted on this issue, and also the members on the hearings panel who considered it. You know, this is a balancing act, I think, but you know, my view is that you know, us as two councils, I don't think that we're going to drive a change in alcohol advertising across New Zealand. I think that is a role for central government, and actually communities can push that through their central government levers. I do have an issue with the idea that actually we've spent a lot of ratepayers' money over a period of time in constructing and maintaining that fantastic facility for us as a region not to get the benefits. And those benefits are not just economic benefits, they're actually benefits for the children who gain a huge amount from being able to attend those events and see those international cricketers. I think probably in time in our society we will see a big change in alcohol advertising, but I don't think that that we're going to achieve that change by taking a stand on this. So I will be supporting the motion today. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, Menak. I'm going to hold my debate, but in terms of my understanding of our standing orders is that somebody can propose an amendment at any time. I'm just looking at our standing orders 23.5. Every proposed amendment must be relevant to the motion under discussion. It doesn't say anything about them having to be sent in advance. I know that we do that as a matter of kind of, respect to. We do that at this council, but that's not actually in our standing orders. I mean, anybody can propose an amendment at any time. And I'm wondering if the governance advisors could just...
Happy to have the guide from governance, but the standing orders also say that it's at the discretion of the chair and that it is, there is quite wide discretion for the chair. And in my view, it is not appropriate process, particularly...
I don't think it actually says that.
Well, no, actually, the standing orders of our council, as I've been advised previously by Robin, is that there are powers that are at the discretion of the chair around when amendments are within order. Here's my difficulty. Now, let me finish because this is important. This is about a management plan for a reserve. And people have insisted that all of the changes go through a process of public consultation. That we had to notify what changes we would make to the reserve plan. People were then able to make submissions and 150 people did. Now, for us to make a change that's not covered in any of the submissions at the last moment, and not something that even I've had the opportunity to be able to ask question of officials about what it might mean or whether it's practical, my view, as your chair, is that I should not accept an amendment. It would be bad process. So I'm declining.
Respectfully, Menak, and this isn't a challenge to you personally at all. I thought if Rohan was here, I'm sure he'd be doing the same thing. But I'm reading the standing orders, and it says nothing about a chair not being able to turn down an amendment. It does ask...
Well, can the council answer this question for me? How is it fair to the public for making a change to a reserve management plan that it must be notified, that the public must have the opportunity to respond to it, for there to be no opportunity for a response, but for a councillor at the last hurdle to be able to propose a change? Could you please explain to me?
I'm happy to respond, Mayor Smith.
No, my question, I've been challenged by Councillor Sanson. My question to Councillor Sanson.
Point of order, standing orders mean that the point of order, I believe, must be taken.
Yeah, no, I am, but I'm at quite fair, Councillor Stella, to ask a question of Councillor Sanson. How would it be fair for us collectively of councils to have a change to a reserve management plan, have to go through a public process, to advertise it, to say exactly what we're doing, and then for a change to be made at the last moment, even without even the opportunity of being able to ask questions of officials of what such an amendment would meet that has not been tabled or circulated?
No,
how can that be?
Yeah,
my question to you is, how can that be good process?
So my understanding is that Councillor Greening, from his debate and his proposed amendment, is wanting to make an amendment to the recommendations. I don't believe that he said anywhere that he's making an amendment to the reserve plan. I mean, this is a democratic process, and I think it's going to be super unfortunate if this is what becomes the kind of story out of today's meeting. You know, I mean, we have a democratic process and elected members are able to provide amendments. I mean, if
but I need to be quite plain when I don't know what approach Mayor King takes in Tasman. but I need to be quite plain with my colleagues in Tasman District that I do not expect to receive amendments without any notice at all on a matter that has been through a process of the sort of this. And I just simply advise Tasman councillors.
Just to raise a point of order, and correct me if I've heard this wrong, Councillor Sanson, that was mentioned. If it was Councillor Skinner, that would be what different? I'll be allowed
No,
to do an
I was going
amendment.
to say it's got nothing to do with the position that Councillor Greening's proposing. That if it was Councillor Skinner, I would still be saying he has a right to make to propose an amendment. So that was it. Yeah, it's all good.
I've drawn my point.
Totally.
So I'm look, if the council wants to overrule me, I'm happy for someone to move the chair be overruled. But I am ruling that I'm not in a position to receive an amendment. I've received no notice of an amendment. The motion has been moved and seconded, and that if someone wished to move that a motion that the amendment be accepted and the chair be overruled, I'm happy to accept such a resolution.
I'm happy to make one.
Councillor O'Neill-Stevens.
I think if there's motions in process, I'll stay out of this.
Unless someone wants to move a motion, and I'll accept a motion.
Yeah, I'm happy to move a motion.
That the chair be overruled.
I'm happy to move a motion that the chair be overruled.
Okay, a motion from, is there a seconder for Councillor Greening's motion that the chair be overruled?
Just a clarification, if an amendment's to be made, it's not to be made during debate. So this was during debate of the motion on the table, recommendation on the table, and then amendment was made during debate. That is wrong process and poor process. So in that sense, an amendment should be made before you move into debate.
I can't make an amendment to a motion that hasn't been made.
The councillor
was in the debate when he brought a motion.
I have a simple resolution that's been moved by Mark Renning that the chair be overruled, and I'm happy to accept it. Is there a seconder?
I have a point of order. I mean,
there's a simple issue as to someone's going to second Councillor Greening's motion or not. And if it is a seconder, we will debate it. If there's not a seconder, it will lapse. Is there any person that is wanting to second the resolution? Councillor Stella. There's a move and seconder. That means the resolution is now open for debate. Councillor Greening, you can put the case as to why the chair should be overruled.
Quite simply, as kind of outlined by Councillor Sanson, this is a motion not to the plan. So it's not affecting the plan, but it does support the plan. As the hearings already noted, the CEO has a delegation to negotiate. This guidance supports those negotiations. So both the hearing committee was aware that the CEO would have to negotiate. I am wrapping some guidance outside of the plan to support the CEO's negotiations so that we understand exactly what the bottom line will be in any negotiations, which is outside the plan. So I think it's perfectly consistent. I've responded to the debate and I've offered what I think is a concern that needs to be addressed. I can't make an amendment if I don't have a motion to start with. And I wasn't given the opportunity to start the motion. I did have my hand up earlier.
Thanks, Councillor Green. The seconder.
Thanks, Minute. We shouldn't be having this debate. As far as I know, in standing orders, and I'm reading standing orders, all motions and amendments move during a debate, so it's okay to move it during a debate. There's no provision for the chair to deny an amendment. Let's not, go any more deeply into diverging from our standing orders. If we shouldn't be having this debate, but let's allow this amendment because it's allowed under our standing orders.
In speaking to the resolution, the Standing Order 21.1 of the General Rules of the Nelson City Council, the application of any procedural matters in the section of the Standing Orders, such as the number of times a member can speak, when a chair can accept a procedural motion or amendment to close or adjourn, is subject to the discretion of the chairperson. Now, as your chairperson of this meeting, I've received no notice of any amendment. I am even at this point not sure what the amendment is. I've got some vague idea that we might want to add to the reserve management plan some guideline for the chief executive.
That's not the case at all.
Oh, look, I'm sorry, you don't get the opportunity, Mr. Greenie, to interrupt me. I didn't interrupt you. My view is that there is some vague notion of an amendment. And my last point would be, let's be clear about what we're doing with a reserves management plan. The law requires that any change to a reserve management plan be notified, that reserve management plan amendments be subject to public submissions. That is why we've had to go down the road of having all the submissions on the very issue. For us, at the last sort of hurdle, to then say that we want to make a change without any opportunity to question officials or being specific on it is poor process. And that is why I made a ruling that I would not accept Councillor Greening's amendment. Are there any further debate contributions? Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, Rennick. So just reading our standing orders at 21.1, it says the application of any, I'll just skip the first part of it, such as a number of times a member may speak or when a chair can accept a procedural motion to close or adjourn a debate is at the subject of the chairperson. Now, my understanding is that this isn't a procedural motion to close or adjourn a debate, that this is simply proposing of an amendment. So I'm not sure that 21.1 does actually apply to this situation, Rennick. Rohan's on. Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Rohan. O'Neill
Thanks. It's a standing orders question. You know I can't resist dipping in on it. I think there's a few things here where actually the debate that's occurring, and particularly around the merit of the resolution or the amendment as it relates to the procedures and how it interacts with the consultation process that has gone on, I think is very valid and something that I buy into to some degree. I don't think that that is directly relevant to the consideration of whether or not we should accept or whether or not the amendment should be debated. Bad amendments can be put up. In my opinion, they often are, but we still have the debate on them. I think just in considering this, I'm just reflecting on the Wellington City Council's recent controversy around the acceptance of amendments that might otherwise have failed, but that were rejected on the basis of them being put forward in chairperson's discretion. And I think that oftentimes that just makes for a murkier debate in this space. And it certainly is the case that we do accept amendments on the fly. I'm sure the governance advisors always love a spoken word amendment, and it's not best practice, it's not best procedure. But I think to exclude those sets a precedent that actually isn't upheld in our general operation, and that the debate should be had on its merits and then decided by the council.
Any other contributions? Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you very much. I mean, I don't have at my fingertips Nelson City Council standing orders, so I feel as though I'm a bit lacking in information. I know that in Tasman, generally speaking, my experience has been an amendment comes before a resolution is seconded. And that in this case, we had a discussion and the amendment came after the resolution had been seconded.
Correct.
So it would seem to me that, I don't want to offer a suggestion, but maybe a suggestion could be Councillor Greening could foreshadow that he will be proposing an amendment should the original resolution be lost. But I do feel a bit, lacking in information, given I'm assuming none of the Tasman councillors here are sitting looking at Nelson City Council standing orders.
Correct. And it's clearly been the practice, and I'm not that familiar because Nelson's had good a polite approach where people that have wanted to move amendments. It has been clarified for me by governance officials that in the event that the resolutions 1, 2, 3, 4 before us was lost, then it would be within standing orders for Councillor Greening to move an alternative motion. Are there any further contributions? I should give Councillor Greening, who has wanted to overrule the chair, his right of reply on that resolution.
Yes, so for clarity, I wouldn't be forewarning a motion because this is an amendment to the motion. I can't make an amendment. You only foreshadow if the amendment is contrary to the motion. This amendment is not contrary to the motion. It supports the motion and wraps guidance around any future negotiations which are in the plan in terms of directions.
No, Councillor Greening, I am going to ask you to stay within standing orders, and that is you will get the opportunity to debate the amendment and that the resolution is passed. You must complete the right of reply on the resolution to overrule the chair. That is solely the issue, overruling the chair.
Well, I've responded to supporting my reasoning for overruling the chair because he's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Put that to the vote. Those that are in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. No. I declare the resolution lost. We come back to the substantive motion. Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, Mayor Nick. Unfortunately, I have such a bad taste in my mouth after that very unpleasant unfolding of events. I think it's really unnecessary to have, for it to have played out that way. Anyway, back to the matter at hand.
Councillor Sanson, I do take offence at the language likes of unpleasant. I am simply doing my very best as mayor not to be pleasant, unpleasant or anything else, but to conduct the affairs of this council in a good due process for a community. And for you to start your contribution by effectively having a shot at me is not fair in the standards that I expect from councillors around the table as I try and do my duties as the mayor of this community.
So before I begin on the matter at hand, I will just respond that I really appreciate Councillor Rohan O'Neill-Stevens' contribution today so far, where he outlined that per our standing orders, it is actually permitted to propose an amendment at any stage.
Councillor Sanson, the issue of the amendment has been ruled upon and voted upon. The matter before the council is the 4 resolutions before us. You shall address your comments to those.
So my sense is that this kind of whole matter has been proposed as kind of the fun police, like trying to stop people having a beer at a cricket game. I don't think that is the matter at hand at all. Like the concerns being raised, evidentially based concerns based on longitudinal studies about the harm of alcohol advertising, in particular to young people, is not about stopping people having a drink at the game. It's not about poor behaviour at the game. It's about the long-term health impacts of alcohol advertising, and there's very clear evidence base to that. And fortunately, we have Nelson Marlborough Health who have come and presented those, which has, resulted in the policy that we had last time. I think that the narrative here, from this whole day really is unfortunate. But in terms of the matter at hand, this could have been an opportunity for New Zealand cricket and Asahi to show leadership and to say, we hear the concerns of this beautiful little community. We acknowledge that they have at heart community wellbeing, and we are going to respond to those in a really forward-thinking way by embracing zero alcohol beer advertising. It would have been an opportunity for them to show that they acknowledge our community concerns and wider concerns around the impacts of alcohol Unfortunately, that's not the case, and we're kind of left with the sense that if we don't say yes and give them an exemption, they're going to pull the games away from us, which I just think is a really, unfortunate position for us to be in. It feels a little, like it feels like kind of quid pro quo. When I think about our community and our region, I think that's really important, the story that we're telling about ourselves. We are a beautiful region. We value quality of life. We value an active and healthy lifestyle. We value community well-being. We value our future generations. We are an incredibly welcoming region. We welcome people from all over the country and the world to live and to visit here. And I think that this is an opportunity for us to open our arms and welcome New Zealand cricket and to say, bring your games here, come and visit and watch these games without being hitched to the harm of alcohol advertising. So I just think that, the way this has played out in all respects has been harmful, I would say. And unfortunately, I think the decision that is likely to go through today is just going to perpetuate harm in our community. And I wholeheartedly agree with the comments of Councillor Greening that it is our responsibility to change our little part of the world and to influence the outcome for better. So unfortunately, I can't support the motion in front of us today.
Thanks, Councillor Sanson. Other contributions? Councillor Skinner, then Anderson.
Thank you. It's a bit unfortunate we get onto a negative about this event. It's an incredible event, the cricket. It incredibly showcases Nelson, incredibly showcases good behaviour. My time in council and prior, there's never been any poor behaviour due to alcohol advertising and no poor behaviour due to advertising candy floss. Should we be phasing out candy floss and evil that in the sugars? We should have an opportunity to highlight this region grows some of the best hops in the world for brewing. We've got some of the best local breweries in the region in New Zealand and maybe the world. And yes, I was brought up a vegetarian and a teetotaler. I enjoy my milkshakes and pies now, and I enjoy the odd beer or wine with my food in a responsible manner. And even some would dare to say it's quite medicinal. And if we're going to just demonise, I do have an empathy when we're talking about the well-being of our community, but we seem to have gone off track in demonising any organisation that provides or produces a product. Do we demonise the March Fest? Do we demonise the mask parade for having lollies? Come on, I'm going to say, get a grip. This is an amazing event. And the people that organise this event do incredibly well looking out for the well-being of the people there. The people that attend it look out for each other's well-being. And I'm sure if anyone was out of line in any way, there are strict rules and regulations how any product is advertised, consumed and served, and they're followed very well. And I think this council will be the first to jump on. I know our staff would, even before that, would jump on anyone going outside of any sort of honourable use of this event. Do we want cricket? Do we want international cricket? Do we want women's cricket? Yes, we do. We as a council have put a lot of money into this facility and supporting this facility. And this council around the table wholeheartedly supported the women's cricket there and the men's cricket there. And then we put this little spur up. No other town or city in New Zealand even dream of trying to reduce their cards for the World Cup cricket coming to the region, let alone any other international cricket. So by all means, there's a time and place, and I have a lot of respect for people who take a stand on all sorts of things. But I was disappointed earlier in the year, and I made that point very clear, that this table is sort of used for those virtue signalling. But let's spotlight the positive. And the positive has been an incredible event, incredibly well behaved, and an incredibly good example to families young and old. how to enjoy an event and celebrate Nelson. So as you can probably realise, I'm completely supportive of what we got here, and bring on the World Cup 2028 to Nelson. And let's get some more women's games here as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, through the Mayor. If New Zealanders followed safe drinking practice guidelines, the alcohol industry revenue will drop by 38%. So harm reduction cuts into profits. They advertise their sports for a very good reason. I agree with all the benefits. Like cricket's, having these games here is going to be amazing. And I would never diminish that. And I don't understand how people have to try and diminish or minimise the alcohol harm. It's a thing as a trade-off. And I totally understand and respect where my colleagues land. Good versus, the benefits and wellness. I totally get it and I understand. I in a previous life, service user and worker in alcohol and addiction. I don't like drugs. I don't like drug dealers, and I do not like a bully. So no alcohol advertisement, no cricket. That's the way I see it. So I'm just going to keep it short. You've heard all the numbers. I will not be supporting this.
Councillor Rainey.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. Councillor Skinner says that some of us potentially are demonising the consumption of alcohol. Far from it. Absolutely far from it. The expression of this community towards alcohol is very clear. We grow hops, we produce beer, we have festivals like March Fest. Bring it on. They are R18 festivals, or they're a controlled festival of beer drinking, or whatever it might be. So when there's an assertion that we should get a grip, I would like to really put forward that we are getting a grip, because that indeed is what this is all about. There was also a comment that it's great to see young people see their heroes. They are seeing their heroes playing cricket. It's great. But unfortunately, they're seeing their heroes coming bundled with it's right and proper to drink alcohol in association with playing cricket. And if you go to the Cricket New Zealand website and look at their list of sponsors and read what it says under Asahi, it's very clear that they want to link the drinking of alcohol with cricket. It's very clear. The Chief Executive said New Zealand Cricket has no desire to push alcohol. Well, if that was the case, we wouldn't be having this meeting today. They are absolutely happy to push alcohol. Now, I love watching cricket. I really love watching cricket. I love Saxon Oval. I was instrumental in getting that Saxon Pavilion architecturally designed. I was absolutely instrumental in that decision to make that happen, because there was an appalling design of that building that came forward from Nelson Cricket. And I said, well, there's no way that Nelson City Council is going to support that unless you design a proper building. And look at the result we've got, a fantastic building. Nothing gives me greater pleasure than watching a cricket game on TV that's in Nelson and thinking, doesn't that look fantastic? And I completely agree with all of the passion about selling our region and selling the possibilities at Saxon Oval to the world. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. I love watching cricket. Unlike many of my close friends and family, I'm not a cricket tragic. But I do enjoy watching it, especially when New Zealand are doing well, which, to be fair, is a bit hit and miss these days. So if I'm asked, will allowing alcohol advertising at international games make any difference to the harm that alcohol is causing in our society? And I say probably not. But that actually is like saying that throwing another can of petrol into a house fire won't make any difference. It all adds up. Sooner or later, some of us need to stand up and just say no. Now, I respect that for most of you around the table today, given the circumstances, you're not prepared to say no. Fair enough, I understand. But given the circumstances, I think that Nelson and Tasman could and should lead the way and say no to New Zealand cricket and Asahi on this issue. This is a matter of principle, and I wholeheartedly agree that the proposal to bring international games to Nelson creates a long list of benefits to the region. That's very clear, but it comes with associated fishhooks. Have we done enough through this process to demonstrate that we have concerns for and responsibility to our respective community? Probably yes, and I acknowledge the work from staff, I really do, and from the Saxon Committee. I also acknowledge the detail contained within the proposal that the Chief Executives and the Saxon Committee Chair will have discretion, but the outcome has been made extremely clear this morning. The outcome will remain the same. By caving into pressure from those who should know better and those who should do the right thing, we are indeed, in my mind, throwing another can of petrol onto the fire. When an opportunity to advertise alcohol to minors presents itself to Asahi, they will take it. When the ensuing dollars are offered to New Zealand cricket, they will take it. And obviously, as has been mentioned, the might and lobbying grunt of the large tobacco companies has been successful in getting Wellington to roll back tobacco harm reduction legislation. The reaction from health professionals almost unilaterally around the country was instant, significant, and very pertinent. Now, the same restrictions don't currently apply to alcohol, which arguably creates even more chaos in our society than tobacco. And that is no excuse. Every single step taken to reduce the harm to our society is a step that we should do, and the ban at Saxon is important in that regard. To suggest that this is about us giving consideration to behaviour at cricket matches, it's got nothing to do with that. It's the ensuing coupling of the consumption of alcohol with our cricket heroes. That is the issue, and for young people especially. And I have to say, having run events all around this country, in every single city in this country for over 30 years, Nelson, the young kids of Nelson don't have a flash reputation when it comes to dealing with alcohol. It's not that good. So, rather than saying to those of us that oppose this resolution, why are you putting us in this situation, turn and ask New Zealand Cricket and Asahi Beverage the same question. Why are you putting little old Nelson in this situation? New Zealand Cricket, you don't have to rely on Asahi sponsorship to put in place international cricket. And Asahi, you should stay out of sports fields with alcohol advertising. I'm not saying stay out of our sports fields with advertising. Why not advertise your zero alcohol beer? And I understand that this is a bit of a red herring, and I've read that narrative, but Asahi Zero Beer is a fantastic product. I drink it. And if it's good enough for Formula One, for the large football franchises around the world that have taken on zero beer advertising, and ladies and gentlemen, within a few days, the Olympics. Number one sponsor is Zero Beer. The Olympics. Why is it not good enough for the New Zealand cricket? There's a massive, massive change happening around the world as people realise how invasive alcohol is in their lives. We are on the wrong side of history with this decision today. And I know firsthand the damage alcohol abuse and alcohol dependency can have on families and relationships. And I cannot stay quiet when our two city councils roll back an important rule when squeezed into the corner by a sporting association and a massive multinational company who should know better. I say show some resolve. The report suggests it's not considered practical in the short term to continue with the ban, but in the long term, after we have satisfied our immediate desire for international games, will we really harden our response to the potential harm presented by alcohol advertising and reverse this decision? The cynic in me says that will never happen. The decoupling of alcohol and sport will only happen when our society says no. And that should happen right here and right now. I won't support this.
Any further contributions? Councillor Stella.
Thanks, Mayor Nick. Just responding to a few of the points that have been raised. I do appreciate all the contributions that we've heard. I think we're getting to the point where you want to hear when you've had all the cards on the table. We know the pros and cons and so on. I don't see what's before us as a compromise. I don't believe that health concerns are being blown out of proportion. That statement's inconsistent with all the peer-reviewed literature on that's looking at health and alcohol. I would like to acknowledge the work of the Joint Committee to bring this before us today, and acknowledge, the great benefit that these games bring to the region. This is not about people's behaviour at the game. This is about cultural aspects of our relationship between alcohol and society and sport, and it's about our attitude to companies seeking to legitimise and normalise their product and not really take responsibility for the harm it causes. It has been a wild ride to get to where we are today. So it started in October last year, when one of the points on the agenda was that Central Districts Cricket has replied that without this major sponsor, New Zealand Cricket would withdraw the games from the region. So the ultimatum was delivered very early. At that meeting, Nelson City Council voted to uphold the policy. Within a few days, our chief executive was telling New Zealand Cricket to go ahead and sign on the line. Despite the vote, within a few more days, we had a new vote without, in my opinion, any meaningful new information, and the exemption was granted. Subsequent to that, we had votes on how the recommendations of the Joint Committee dealt with, prior to that being each council individually. The movement was made for the Joint Council to consider it. Now, regardless of intent, and I'm choosing my words very carefully, the effect of that was a kind of gerrymander whereby a close vote in the Nelson Council and not a close vote in Tasman, when we bring those together, it results in not a close vote, and that's a reflection on past voting. Who knows how people will vote today. And today we're being asked to abandon that policy with the intent of later bringing it back again to complete the full circle and end up where we were on October the 19th last year. So to my mind, a deeply unsatisfactory process. But we do need to make a decision today, and I have given some thought to what basis we might make the decision. One basis that I believe we shouldn't be using is that this false narrative over the decision today or the council's control whether or not we receive international cricket. I believe it's a false narrative for three reasons. Firstly, we could see from that agenda last year that it is New Zealand Cricket calling the shots. They say, we'll make decisions, we'll decide where the games are held. If we can't advertise alcohol, we'll go elsewhere. Secondly, prior to this summer, for 5 years, not a single game in the region, despite us wanting to have games, despite spending in the order of, I think, about $1.4 million to maintain a single cricket field of international cricket standard. And also, it is important to recognise that the uncertainty relates to two conflicting policies. We have an existing policy that says no alcohol advertising at Saxon. New Zealand Cricket have a policy whereby they seek to make money by advertising what is literally the most harmful drug in the country at events attended by large numbers of young people and school children. And that's where the uncertainty arises. And I'd give much more weight to the people who are saying to us, come on, change your policy so we can see the cricket. If those same people at the same time were saying to New Zealand Cricket, come on, change your policy so that we can see the cricket. So anyway, what is the basis for a decision today? I looked at three areas. Firstly, the evidence from a public health perspective obviously is important. Secondly, previous reports from the government looking exactly at this issue and what might be the way forward, and then public opinion. Firstly, in terms of a number of very detailed reports that come out of Parliament on alcohol harm, starting in 2010, New Zealand actually, this was the Law Commission, headed by former Prime Minister Sir Geoffrey Palmer, about a 500-page report, Alcohol in Our Lives, Curbing the Harm, that concluded sport and cultural events such as music festivals should not be venues for alcohol advertising given their high use by young people, and there should be no alcohol-related sponsorship of any cultural or sports events or activities. 2014, the Ministerial Forum on Alcohol Advertising and Sponsorship, whereby the Ministers of Justice and Health asked for advice on how we govern alcohol advertising. In that report, minors should not be exposed to alcohol advertising and sponsorship, as it influences the age of first alcoholic drink and rates of consumption among current drinkers, and recommended to ban alcohol sponsorship of sports. The government inquiry into mental health and addiction in 2018 recommended taking a stricter regulatory approach to sale and supply of alcohol based on the previous reports, and said, in our view, the main impediment to stronger alcohol reform is a lack of political will. Reflecting the fact that all the pieces of the puzzles are there, we have evidence from health professionals. There is widespread nationwide support for reform, and we see that from polling that shows a clear majority of people nationwide do support breaking that link between alcohol and sport, and certainly not advertising alcohol to young people. So on the basis of the fact that the medical evidence is very clear, and this isn't about behaviour at the game. I think if we talk to any emergency department doctor on a Friday or Saturday night, they would be saying, take another look at how we present alcohol to young people. There is, at the national level, public support for reform. I say bring on the cricket. I would hope that we all have a shared vision of having these games without drug advertising. I'll be voting today based on that vision, and on that basis, I won't be supporting the motions before us.
Thanks, Councillor Sallard. Deputy Mayor Bryant.
Thank you, Mayor Smith. Thanks very much. I think I have, I was going to say by and large support the resolution. I think there's a huge economic benefit to be gained for both the city and the region through hospitality and accommodation. To say that the alcohol advertising will have a long effect is very hard for me to relate to one day, 2 or 3 hours, really. Most of the children won't even see or young adults won't even see the signage. I remember when I took my son-in-law to the game, I had a job to find the beer to buy for them. So I'm not sure how you're going to relate the two, actually. It's a wonderful facility out there at Saxton's, as others have said. Both councils have put a lot of money into that, and we need to have it being used. We get a huge economic benefit and social benefit from both the game being here physically in the region. People come and travel, stay a few days. We get international exposure on television that you can't really put a price on that. As others have said, I'd just like to thank particularly the Tasman councillors, where we had a little bit of an issue that our 2 members were on the liquor licence, and they did the right thing and stood aside, and Councillor Dykey and Councillor Dowler stood up to hear the submissions. So just I'd like to thank those 4 councillors particularly, and those other councillors for the work they've done on that. And I'd encourage you all to actually support the resolution because of the wider benefits that they put for the whole community and the region, and think that it's really important that we get the exposure and we help our businesses who are struggling at this time and going forward. So thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Stuart Bryant. The floor is Councillor Dan Sawgrass.
Sure. Thank you.
Apologies.
Yeah, it's a bit of a washing machine, right, this meeting, but really good learning. And being 3 years into being sober, which is always an interesting conversation to have with people, because there's normally things flying around like, oh, well, you're an alcoholic, or, you know, what'd you do? Reflecting on this and having young children as well, there's been a massive shift, I believe, and it's just going to keep happening in this zero alcohol industry. There is good data that a lot of our youth, talking sort of, 20s sort of up to 30s, are cutting back on alcohol consumption. It's just a thing that's happening, which I think is great. I do see the harm. I've got a 15-year-old boy that's just starting to dabble and talk about going to some parties and having some drinks, and it's terrifying. But it's about obviously good parenting, exposing them to the right side of alcohol. What I do see with the young kids mainly at the moment is it's not really about beer, it's about RTDs and things like that. So I'd be really uncomfortable if it was some sort of RTD that was being advertised at a cricket match. But it's pros and cons. I love cricket. I will be supporting it, but I think there's going to be a massive shift anyhow, and we have got a great facility. We've just got to utilise that as much as we can, and obviously just try to be proactive in all the other spaces around alcohol and promoting safe drinking. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Shellgrass. Councillor Bench.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. Now, as you know, I'm sort of new at this, but I haven't been to the cricket. My daughter went. She stayed all day. She said it was a fantastic day. Kids rolling down the embankment, sliding on bits of cardboard. She too couldn't see the signage for the beer. Nobody drunk, no one unruly, nothing antisocial. But people have acknowledged that. I don't think there are significant numbers of young people at a cricket match, which is a point which has been laboured. But what I find hard to accept is that we, the council, put on Bay Dreams. And if anybody went to that without the expectation of getting drunk, I don't know who they were, because I went and had a look because I wanted to see what happened there. And I also like to check up my youngest boy. The only comment I got from anyone there was a young girl who said, "What are you doing here, Grandad?" But we were part of bringing in someone to test the drugs that we knew were going to be sold to the participants. Drugs, other than alcohol. What I didn't realise was that the drug dealers go to the tester and get them tested and then go to their punters and say, "I've had this tested by the thing that the council made sure was there for us to..." And there are 2 tents set up to look after these people. 80 or 90% of the people there were drunk, jumping up and down in a huge mass. If 80, 90% of those people had been at a cricket or a rugby match, they'd have been thrown out. Not a peep. But maybe it's because it's the arts. And when I think about that, all the arts here have alcohol before, during, after. Is it just to beat up on the great unwashed who like to play physical sport? I know the damage alcohol does. I've seen it. You know, one family affects about 10 others, drags them all down. It can be appalling. But my experience with it, they were people who had nothing to do with sport and never had. And drugs, I know about drugs as well. I helped rehabilitate a heroin addict for 5 years. The energy that we're spending to try and stop a game of cricket. There were 2 local girls played in that cricket. And the cheers, apparently, every time they did something, was huge. And don't forget, the team they played, England's best, they spent a whole day with school children, talking, teaching, playing. And I don't see the harm. I understand the rhetoric, but is there going to be a world where we have no alcohol? I doubt it. I doubt it. And so it's the same as is there going to be a world without fast food, which also does a huge amount of damage. So it's really about teaching and helping people deal with the choices they make that this world puts in front of them. And I think that the cricket does a lot towards teaching those things. Bay Dreams, no. And that was council and a council operation and not a peep. And it's never even come up here. I think there's a huge double standard here. And I don't see the harm that's going on with the cricket. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bench. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually think it's really, really good that we've had quite a robust discussion about this, and there's been a huge range of perspectives shared. It's not easy topics that we're talking about, but I do, for me, feel like it's actually quite an easy decision when it comes down to it. We've had a lot of people talk about young people, and I think that is it's a really good place to focus the conversation. And I think Councillor Shawcross actually hit the nail on the head, alluding to the changing trends among young people at the moment. I think if you were to ask, a parent of a teenager at the moment what their biggest concern is, I think probably the biggest trend that you would keep hearing about is that they sit in their room, they're on TikTok and those sorts of things, that they're maybe not as well socialized as the generation before them. And I know there's a lot of stereotypes and generalizations in a comment such as that. But I think there's also a lot of truth buried in there as well. And when I think about my children when they're 18, 19, 20 growing up, I would prefer that they're well socialized, that they're out engaged in community events, and that maybe they are aware of alcohol as well. So look, at the end of the day, for me, it comes down to that. It's a weighing of priorities. It's not an easy thing to be discussing. Think of consumerism, to be honest. And I think about what an issue that is for our society. You think about advertising in general, it would be nice to get rid of that completely. But these events hold so much value, and I can't see another path at this stage. So I think, let the cricket go ahead. I think we've got a good balance struck in the middle of this. I hope the conversations continue. And I just want to acknowledge all of the contributions, all of the work that our staff have put into this, and the CE and his conversations, and also Central Districts and New Zealand Cricket too.
Thanks, Councillor Hodgson. I'll just exercise right of reply as the mover of the motion. And I have to say this morning I was a bit reminded by one of the old speakers, Jonathan Hunt, who said Parliament never gets really fired up unless they're debating booze and baccy. And Council has lived up to that today. Look, I just bring this back to a very simple issue, and that is, are we prepared to allow 3 or 4 alcohol advertising signs as part of international cricket at Saxton Field? I do disagree, and I want to be quite specific. Councillor Greening made the statement that Saxton Field Complex and Oval was never built for international events. I disagree strongly. That's not correct. I've been part of that Saxton Field development when I first stood in that paddock with Peter Malone and Kerry Barnshaw, and the ambition always has it for it to be a showcase facility of which we could show Nelson and Tasman at its very best. So I think he's wrong in that regard. Secondly, he said, why do we need to change the reserve management plan at all? Why don't we just do what we did last year? Well, I think that's naive. Let me tell you exactly why. If we do not make this rule change, and we want to have a game with sponsorship allowed in it, it has to go to the Saxton Field Committee. You have to get a report. You have to have 2 separate resolutions go between 2 councils, a process that officers advised me last year would take 4 months. If you want effectively say no, well, damn, say no. Don't pretend that that sort of process is acceptable. I was embarrassed. And actually, I think everybody in Nelson and Tasman should be embarrassed that at the beginning of November, for an international event in our region to occur in December, there was uncertainty as to whether it would proceed or not. If this community seriously believes that we're going to get events and run this region competently, with that sort of uncertainty for the accommodation, for the broadcasters, for the people that had to book things on the ferry, it was totally unacceptable. You need certainty for running major events. The current reserve plan does not provide certainty, and that is why we are making this change. Councillor Greening also raised the question as well. Look, I want more guidelines, I want more detail, because next minute we'll have signs at Saxton Field of little kids drinking pure vodka or whatever other concern he might have. Well, my point to Councillor Greening is this. We don't have to micro-regulate every issue in New Zealand. There's an outfit called the Advertising Standards Authority. They have very strict guidelines around alcohol rules. It's not necessary for us as a little council in a little corner of New Zealand to be trying to micro-regulate every single element. And when I hear there needs to be guidelines, let's be clear about what we're doing today. The Chief Executive is only going to be able to give this discretion if there is an international cricket event, international cricket. Secondly, it's not for new alcohol advertising. The rule's very clear, it's only where there's an existing contractual arrangement. Well, we've made it pretty narrow there as well. And then the third thing is that it is only be for temporary. Now, for goodness sake, how could we get a greater degree of specificity about the discretion that we're giving our two chief executives and the chair of the Saxton Committee? Now, there's been some comments, I think quite unfair, directed at Cricket New Zealand as though they are somehow overreaching. The overreaching is being done by people that are wanting to make a political point properly made in Parliament about sponsorship of alcohol rather than New Zealand cricket or anybody else. We are the outlier. No other community in New Zealand has a rule that attempts to try and change the rules around alcohol sponsorship at a national level by trying to do it within a reserve management plan of a single facility. I'm happy for that debate to occur. Many of the comments here would make great parliamentary speeches for a petition or a private member's bill to make a change. But if there to be change on alcohol sponsorship rules, the right place for it to do it is Parliament, not in the reserve management plan of a facility that was specifically designed for international cricket. I think we've made this harder work than it needed to be. I'm one of those that is just delighted at the prospect of our Nelson Tasman region being able to host the top cricketers in the world in our region, all the enjoyment that goes with it. I'm with those that says that those are responsible events of which there is far more positive and negative. And I'm of a view that the very small number of signs that we present for sponsoring alcohol will make diddly squat difference to the substantive issues that are real around responsible use of alcohol in our community. On that note, I shall put the resolution and ask.
Ask for division.
Yeah.
Ask for division, thank you.
Yes, certainly. I'll ask the Chief Executive, I was just about to cast a vote, to carry a vote of the Joint Committee.
A division of the Joint Committee on clauses 1 to 4. Councillor Anderson.
No.
Councillor Benge.
Yay.
Councillor Brand.
Yes.
Councillor Bryant.
For.
Councillor Courtney.
Aye.
Councillor Dykey. Councillor Ellis.
For.
Councillor Greening.
Against.
Councillor Hill. Are you online or not? Absent. Councillor Hodgson.
Aye.
Councillor Kinnenmuth.
For.
Councillor Mackenzie.
For.
Councillor Mailing. For. Councillor Maru.
For.
Deputy Mayor O'Neill. Stevens. Fallen off. Councillor Paki.
Aye.
Councillor Rainey.
Aye.
Councillor Rollo.
Aye.
Councillor Sanson.
No.
Councillor Shellcrass.
For.
Councillor Skinner.
Yes.
Councillor Stallard.
No.
Mayor Nick.
Aye.
1 moment, please, caller.
See if we can do his best.
The ayes have it 16 to 5.
Thank you very much. I shall conclude the meeting with a closing karakia. Tuia Karonga, Tuia Karoro, Tuia Kiwaho, Tuia Kiroto, Tuia Ti Hi Tangata, Koronga Te Po, Koronga Te Ao, Homea, huia, tae kia. Thank you for all your attendance. Meeting concluded.